Imagine. You weren't born in the 21st century. No crib, no milk, no convenience stores. You open your eyes for the first time in a cold, dark cave. Wind howls through the wild forest. And when you're old enough to eat something tougher than breast milk, the first thing to touch your lips isn't porridge, not bread, but a handful of fresh brain, squeezed from a skull, still leaking blood. No salt, no fire, only fat, warmth, and the metallic scent of life. Welcome to the prehistoric menu, where food wasn't chosen because it was delicious, but because not eating meant death. The Neanderthals, the first Homo sapiens, they didn't live for food. They lived on screaming instinct inside an empty stomach, on rotting guts, writhing maggots, bitter roots, rancid fat, and insects that still twitched, and sometimes on the bodies of their fallen companions. No fridge, no stove, no options. If you were hungry, you swallowed. The things you throw away today, your ancestors call the feast. And if you're sitting here now, alive, thinking, breathing, it's because they once ate every foul, disgusting thing you can't even imagine touching. You are the descendant of those who dared to swallow death itself just to survive one more day. Part 2. Insects and larvae, a reliable source of protein. You think eating bugs is a last resort? A survival challenge from TV? For your ancestors, it was daily life. When prey vanished, when deer tracks disappeared beneath the snow, when traps came up empty, beetles, termites, ants, fat grubs, these were salvation. No labor, no weapons. Just turn over a rotting log, dig beneath a rock, or rummage through a decaying carcass, and the protein was there, still squirming. No washing, no peeling, no cooking. They swallowed them whole. Legs, wings, guts, feces, even the parasites inside. Not because they were savages, but because they calculated and knew that inside those tiny bodies lay a nutritional treasure. Protein up to 80%, vitamin B12, iron, zinc, fats essential for brain development. Archaeologists have found chitin, the exoskeleton of insects, in fossilized feces and ancient dental plaque. Ashes around ancient hearths still contain blackened wings, shattered shells, traces of bug roasts long past. They dried insects, crushed them into powder, mixed with ash, sand, or wood dust for storage and rationing. And in the dead of winter, when everything else was gone, the bugs remained, warm, soft, chewy, and packed with energy. No one grimaced, no one recoiled, no one screamed disgusting. Because when you're starving, you don't see maggots. You see one more day to stay alive. Art 3. Animal brains, fuel for the human mind. You might think the brain is the most terrifying part of an animal, but to your ancestors, it was the most precious. Not the ribs, not the thigh, not the shoulder, the brain. Soft, fatty, warm, bloody, still steaming right after the kill. In prehistory, skulls weren't trophies. They were smashed open, not out of savagery, but because inside was pure energy. A scoop of brain gave them omega-3s, vitamin B12, choline, and essential fats. Without those nutrients, the human brain wouldn't grow, wouldn't learn, wouldn't remember, wouldn't think. So when they hunted large prey, they brought the head back to the cave, not to boast, but to squeeze out every last drop of sustenance. Archaeological finds across Europe and the Middle East show precise, consistent skull incisions, done at weak points, with prepuce, like surgical work. And the brain? Not for the strong. It was given first to children, to pregnant women, to those who needed it most to keep the species alive. Scientists have found elevated levels of fat-soluble vitamins in the bones of prehistoric children, nutrients not found in plants, but only in brain and liver. Even the modern human hand, built to grip tightly, strike hard, hold tools, may have evolved from hundreds of thousands of years of smashing skulls open for brains. We are born to seek knowledge, but first we had to eat brains, to to feed the very thing now doing the thinking. Part 4. Rotten meat, maggots, and leftover corpses. They weren't the best hunters. They couldn't run like cheetahs, weren't strong like lions, no claws, no fangs. But they had one thing most animals didn't: patience and hunger. When the hyenas had just left, when the vultures flew off, that's when prehistoric humans arrived. They approached a corpse, bloated with gas, the belly round and tight, maggots wriggling inside. But that wasn't a horror scene. It was an opportunity, a dinner, a chance to live. They didn't flinch at organs, didn't avoid eyes, didn't skip the guts. They scraped, sucked, tore, and drank from places you wouldn't dare to look. Fossilized bones tell the story clearly. Predator bite marks appear first. Then come the cuts from stone tools. Humans didn't kill the animal. They came after and used what was left. Even if the meat had changed color, oozed fluid, stank of decay, they ate it. Because they knew, rotten meat isn't the enemy. It's just softer meat. And the more rotten, the easier to chew, especially for children, the elderly, the sick. In a world without fridges, without preservation, without choices, rotten meat wasn't waste. It was the last source of nutrition. You say, that's disgusting. They thought, if it's edible, it's life. From those discarded corpses, our species survived one more winter. And if you're here today, watching this, it's because someone, in a freezing cave long ago, swallowed a piece of meat that even the wolves had walked away from. Part 5. Roots, wild greens, and emergency food. When meat was gone, when insects disappeared in the freezing wind, when the traps were empty and even the maggots had been eaten, they turned to the ground and started digging. Not for treasure, but for food, buried beneath mud, tangled roots, and stone. Lily roots, wild tubers, bitter reeds, swamp bulbs, everything went into the mouth. Rough, fibrous, choking. Not because it was tasty, but because it was edible, and it didn't kill you. Before fire, many roots were little more than edible gambles. Eat the wrong one, you'd vomit, cramp, get diarrhea. But if you didn't die, you'd eat it again next time. Then fire came, and with it, a kind of magic. Roasting roots and ashes, burying them under hot stones. Cellulose broke down. Starch was released. What was once a poisonous root became fuel for a starving brain. In Shanidar Cave, Iraq, home to 70,000-year-old remains, scientists found wild mustard seeds lodged in ancient teeth, not for flavor, but likely used to mask bitterness or detoxify roots. Prehistoric people weren't chasing flavor. They were chasing survival, something to chew, swallow, and last them until morning. And if you love salad, fresh greens, or go on plant-based diets today, it might be because your ancestors once survived on a fistful of bitter roots dug from the mud. Art 6. Fat and marrow. Strategic energy. When meat was gone, when the maggots were gone, when the bugs had vanished beneath the snow, there was still one thing left: fat. Not excess fat, not the bad fat you've been told to avoid, but the most energy-dense substance your ancestors ever had. 1 gram of fat held twice as much energy as meat, and it didn't need to be fresh, pretty, or even clean. It just had to exist. Prehistoric humans knew this. When the animal was gone, they didn't throw away the bones. They picked the long bones, packed with white marrow, and buried them in the ground. Weeks later, starving, they dug them up, cracked them open, and sucked out the last greasy drop. Some caves still bear traces of melted fat, preserved fat, fermented fat mixed with ash, sealed in animal skin. They made something you could almost call Stone Age butter, thick, pungent, high-calorie paste that could save a life in winter. It might have gone rancid, it might have smelled, it might have oozed like mud, but they ate it anyway, not for pleasure, not for craving, but because if they didn't eat, it meant death. If you're alive today, it's not because your ancestors ate clean. It's because they licked the last trace of fat from a split bone and lived. Part 7. Seafood and coastal carcasses. To modern humans, the sea is a vacation spot. But to your ancestors, it was a place to survive. No fishing rods, no nets, no boats, just the retreating tide and whatever the waves threw onto the shore. Crabs with broken claws, bloated fish, smashed jellyfish, slippery seaweed, gutted sea cucumbers. That wasn't garbage. That was dinner. Neanderthals who lived near the coast didn't pick and choose. They gathered whatever was still soft, still wet, still reeking of salt, and ate it right there on the sand. Grit in their teeth, salty blood on their tongues. No waiting for it to cook. No need for it to be clean. Rotten shrimp livers, slimy fish guts, barnacle-crusted clamshells. These were packed with omega-3, iron, iodine, vitamin B12. The things that kept their brains firing and hearts beating through freezing winters. Inside ancient teeth, scientists have found traces of sea salt, microalgae, and shell calcium. Undeniable proof. They ate seafood regularly. Sometimes fish were hung to dry in the wind, eaten after they'd become stiff or just slightly rotten. But most of the time, they ate what the sea gave them while it was still cold, still raw, still tangled with algae. They didn't need sauces. They didn't need fire. Just something soft, fatty, and slow enough to catch. Because to them, between rock and wave, one dead fish could be worth more than a whole herd of antelope. Part 8. Dirty water and survival skills. You can survive a week without food, but go 2 days without water, and you're dead. Your ancestors knew this better than anyone. The problem was they had no filters, no stoves, no thermoses. So where did they drink from? From muddy puddles trampled by buffalo, from rainwater trapped in leaves, from cloddy streams heavy with sediment, from stagnant pools near animal dung, even from foul water with maggots swimming in it. Not because they didn't know what dirty meant, but because dehydration kills faster than diarrhea. Still, they didn't drink recklessly. They observed. Where do animals drink regularly? Where does the water not have scum or green foam? Could they dig beside a stream and let water filter through the soil? They learned how to filter water using roots, dry grass, or charcoal from their fires. They let it sit in the sun, warmed it slightly, lessening the shock to the gut. Sometimes they even threw burning embers straight into their drinking water. Not because they understood bacteria, but because experience taught them. Water with charcoal makes you vomit less. When nothing else was available, they licked dew off rocks, squeezed roots for moisture, chewed on fleshy leaves. Every drop was life. So if the thought of drinking dirty water makes you gag, remember, your ancestors drank it, so you could sit here today and scroll on your phone. Part 9. Animal dung, the final option. Sounds disgusting, doesn't it? Eating feces? Not a joke, not the act of a deranged mind, but a final survival strategy when there's no meat, no maggots, no roots, and an empty stomach screaming by the minute. Your ancestors, Neanderthals, early Homo sapiens, understood something vital. Herbivore dung wasn't just waste. Inside it were plant fibers, undigested starch, remnants of nutrition the gut of a deer or bison hadn't absorbed. And in a world without bread, without porridge, that meant calories. That meant hope. Evidence from ancient fire pits reveals a chilling truth. Dung was dried, crushed, mixed with ash, sometimes even cooked. No one called it a delicacy, but it saved lives. If a pile of dung was still warm, still moist, still steaming, it still had value. No one scooped it up by the handful, but they would crumble it, pick out maggots, find the softer parts, and swallow slowly. Not because they were inhuman, but because they knew how noble is starvation really when you're dead. You might shudder, but if you're alive today, it could be because someone long ago in the heart of a hopeless winter stared into a steaming pile of feces and decided, this will keep me alive. Part 10. Eating human flesh. When there is no choice. You don't always get to choose. Food doesn't always come from deer or fish. There are days, in the dead of winter, buried in a snow-choked cave, surrounded by silence, when the last meal is the person beside you. Not out of want, not out of cruelty, but because one still lived and the other no longer did. Across prehistoric sites in Europe, archaeologists have uncovered human bones with clean cuts, split skulls, cracked femurs with marrow removed, rib cages opened like butchered game. There were no signs of ritual, no respectful burial, only processing for consumption. It could have been a stranger, a friend, a child, a parent, a lover. But for those who remained, flesh, brain, liver, intestines, marrow were nutrition. Survival continued not through mercy, but through cold calculation and desperate choice. You may recoil in horror, but your ancestors once stared at a lifeless body and understood, if we don't eat, we all die. Not murder for meat, but eating the already dead so others wouldn't have to follow. And if you're alive, if you're trembling watching this video, remember, someone in your bloodline may once have sat in a frozen cave, lit a fire, and shared a piece of someone they loved, just to live until spring. Part 11. The biological legacy inside you. You're sitting in a room with a roof. You have clean water, fresh meat, organic fruit, sweet pastries in your fridge, and a food delivery app on your phone. But deep inside, you're still the biological replica of someone who once clawed through dirt, tore raw flesh, and licked fat from cracked bones. Did you know everything your ancestors once ate still echoes in your body today? Your hands? They weren't made to type. They were made to grip stones, crush skulls, pry marrow from frozen bones. Your brain? It's the biggest of any primate, but it runs on fat, sugar, B12, and salt, the same nutrients your ancestors once drew from raw blood, animal brains, feces, and worms. Your digestive system? Not perfect, but still capable of handling rot, rancid fat, even a bit of bacteria, because your ancestors survived tens of thousands of meals made of what we now call garbage. And that craving you have for salty snacks, for crispy fried food, for fat? It's not weakness. It's a genetic memory born from hundreds of thousands of years of hunger. You recoil at the idea of eating rotting meat, animal guts, insects, maggots. That's fine. You feel that way because you're safe, because you have choices. But your ancestors didn't. They ate those things so you could exist. They didn't choose courage. They simply couldn't afford to fall. You live because they didn't die. You live in a world of comfort. You can pick between grilled tofu, vegan bowls, keto snacks, or skip dinner entirely. But remember this, your body doesn't forget. It's still the product of 1,000 generations who ate maggots, drank dirty water, gnawed rotten bones to stay alive. If you think what they did was insane, imagine this. You carry within you the last trace of that evolutionary memory. And if you want to understand where we come from, the instincts we still hold, and why you crave fried food at midnight, hit subscribe. This channel doesn't just tell stories of the past. We rip open time itself to show you. You are not more civilized. You are simply at peace. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because there are truths still buried. And together, we'll keep digging, like our ancestors once did beneath the snow, to find life.